Hey, Wide Awake family. If you see this, it's your sign to smash that like button. Yes, you listening right now. That way YouTube shows you more amazing stories like this one. We love you all. Now enjoy the stories. I swear I should have trusted my gut the second I got in his car. Not because he looked dangerous or creepy or anything dramatic like that. He actually looked normal, clean hoodie, fresh haircut, smile that didn't look forced. But something about the way he rushed me into the passenger seat felt weird, like he didn't want anyone seeing us standing outside his car too long. He said he wanted to take me for a drive because talking in the car always felt more relaxed than sitting in some awkward cafe staring at each other. I didn't hate the idea. It was early evening, not dark yet, and the roads were still busy. It felt safe enough. Plus, he had been calm in the chat, not pushy. He sent voice notes, talked about work, family, interests, all normal. But the weird feeling started the moment my seatbelt clicked in. He gave this tight smile and said something like, "Let's get moving." Not flirty, not excited, almost urgent. He pulled off a bit too quickly, checking his mirrors 3 times before we even left his road. I asked if everything was okay, and he said, yeah, of course, just getting used to the car again. But the driving wasn't the problem. It was smooth, confident, like he knew the roads well. It was him. He kept glancing out the back window. He kept lowering his body slightly in the seat, like he didn't want to be seen through the windscreen of the car behind us. He didn't play music, didn't open the windows, didn't even let me adjust the air. We drove past the town center and down some long roads with wide fields on both sides. Pretty scenery, sunset hitting the sky, everything that should have made the moment feel peaceful. But it didn't. Because every time a car appeared behind us, he stiffened. Every time someone switched lanes too close, he slowed down. When a van followed behind us for more than 30 seconds, he started breathing faster. I thought maybe he had driving anxiety. Lots of people do. So I didn't judge. I just sat quietly, trying to make light conversation and ignoring the tight knot forming in my stomach. He finally started to relax once we reached this quieter stretch of road with barely any traffic. He leaned back, loosened his grip on the wheel, even smiled a little. He asked me random questions about my favorite food, favorite holidays, stupid stuff just to fill the silence. Just when things felt like they were finally settling. Blue lights appeared behind us. Police. Not speeding, not sirens, just lights. My heart dropped instantly. He didn't say a single word. He didn't even blink. He just stared straight ahead with this blank expression like he knew this was coming, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. The police car flashed its lights again. He whispered under his breath that they probably weren't for him. Seconds later, the loudspeaker turned on telling him to pull over immediately. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. He pulled onto the side of the road slowly, too slowly, like he was trying to buy time. He gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I sat there frozen, praying it was a random check or something minor. Maybe a brake light, maybe a speed check. But the police didn't approach the car casually. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts, eyes sharp. One went to his side, the other came to mine. I rolled down the window with shaking fingers. The officer asked me if I was okay, and the question alone made my stomach twist even harder. They asked him to turn off the engine. He did. They asked him to step out of the car. He hesitated for a split second, then got out. One officer asked for his license. The other kneeled slightly to look at the front number plate. He radioed something quietly, waited, then frowned, really frowned. The officer told me to stay inside the car. That's when everything clicked. The officer radioed it again, louder this time, reading the registration number out. They waited a few seconds, and then it came back through the radio. The number plate belonged to a completely different car. Different make, different model, different color. My whole body went cold. The officer stepped back and said something low to the second officer. The second officer grabbed my date's arm immediately. He didn't fight, but he looked away like he didn't want me to see his face. I stayed frozen in the passenger seat, terrified to move. The officer explained, mostly for my sake, that the number plate on his car was linked to another vehicle involved in a recent crime in a nearby town. Something about a hit and run, a stolen parcel delivery, a witness claiming the driver sped off before the police arrived. The plate was flagged in their system. The moment his car passed an ANPR camera earlier, patrol cars were alerted to look for him. I felt my stomach flip. My hands went numb. He tried to speak then. He said the car wasn't stolen. He said he bought it cheap from a friend. He said he didn't know anything about the plate. But the officer ignored all of it. They already knew he was lying, or they already expected this sort of story. When he saw me staring, he finally looked back. He didn't look angry. He didn't look guilty. He just looked tired, like he'd been running from this moment for a long time. The officers cuffed him right there in front of me, leaning him against the police car while they searched his vehicle. They found tools in the boot. Not illegal, but suspicious. Screwdrivers, gloves, a thick roll of tape, a plate frame. Things that didn't make sense for a normal casual drive. One officer asked me to step out of the car carefully and give a statement about how I met him. I explained everything. Tinder, first date, short drive, my voice shaking the whole time. They told me I wasn't a suspect, but they needed to confirm he didn't pick me up under false pretenses. They asked if I knew the car wasn't his. I said no. They asked if he gave any weird excuses earlier. I said no. They asked if anything felt off. I said yes. They thanked me for cooperating and arranged a ride for me back to town because they weren't comfortable letting me walk alone on that road. When I looked back one last time, he was already in the back of the police car, staring at the floor like all his running had finally caught up to him. When I checked Tinder later, his profile was gone. Deleted. Erased. Like he never existed at all. I keep thinking about how easily I could have looked the other way, ignored the weird driving, laughed off the nervous glances. How easily he could have driven me somewhere far from town before the police caught up. And how the entire time he smiled at me, his number plate was screaming someone else's name. She looked normal enough. Nice outfit, light makeup, hair done like she actually tried for the date, but her eyes were doing something strange. Not shaking, not panicking, but scanning, like she was counting exits or checking for someone watching her. She kept pushing her hair behind her ear even when it wasn't falling, and her breathing was slightly too fast for someone who was just meeting a guy for a casual drink. I told myself she was just shy or maybe anxious about dating. Loads of people get nervous. I didn't want to judge her off the first minute, so I smiled, said hey, and we walked toward the little outdoor seating area at the bar she picked. She kept glancing over her shoulder every few steps. I pretended I didn't notice, even though it made my stomach twist. We sat down at a table under one of those heaters that clicks every time the flame shifts. She sat with her back to the wall instead of facing the street. She positioned her chair so she could see both the entrance and the side path. She held her bag on her lap the whole time like someone might snatch it if she let it go. I asked if she was all right, and she gave this weird half-smile, saying she was just cold, but she wasn't. She wasn't even shivering. She was tense in a way that had nothing to do with weather. The waitress came to take our order, and the girl startled so hard she actually knocked the menu off the table. I bent to pick it up, and when I handed it back, she whispered thanks like she'd been caught doing something wrong. She read her nails over and over again like she was waiting for bad news. I tried to keep the conversation going because the silence made everything worse. She answered my questions but never relaxed. Her eyes kept darting to the street. Every time a car slowed down, she stiffened. Every time a group walked past, she lowered her head like she didn't want to be seen. I kept telling myself she was socially anxious. I was wrong. Halfway through our drinks, a police car turned onto the road next to us. Not fast, not loud, just slow enough to look like they were searching for something. I didn't think it had anything to do with us. They patrolled town all the time. Nothing weird. The girl's reaction told me everything. Her hand froze around her glass. Her eyes widened. Her whole body leaned back like she was trying to disappear into the metal chair. She whispered something under her breath that I didn't catch and gripped her bag so tight her knuckles turned white. The police car stopped. Right across the street. The officers inside looked around slowly, scanning. Her breathing sped up. I asked her what was wrong. She shook her head too fast, saying nothing, 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 but the way her voice cracked told me she was lying and panicking hard. Then the officers got out of the car and started walking toward the outdoor seating area. Straight toward us. My stomach dropped. She muttered no under her breath and stood up like she was about to run. I didn't grab her or touch her. I just stared, confused, scared, trying to piece together what the hell was happening. The officers reached our table and said her name. Her real name. The name she gave me wasn't even close. She froze like her soul left her body. The officer asked her to stay calm. She didn't respond. She didn't breathe. She looked like someone trapped in a nightmare she'd been waiting for. They told her she needed to come with them. She shook her head again, whispering something about it being a misunderstanding. One of the officers gently took her arm. The moment he touched her, her legs buckled. She didn't collapse. She just folded, like all the strength in her body gave out at once. The entire bar went silent. People looked over the railing. The waitress stopped carrying drinks. The detective who stepped out of the car explained quickly, not to her, to me, because I was sitting there frozen and confused, that she'd been caught earlier trying to break into her ex's house. His doorbell camera caught her pulling at the lock, checking windows, circling the garden. When the neighbor confronted her, she ran to her car and drove off. They got her plate number. Traffic cameras picked up her car heading toward town. And then they saw her car parked across the street from the bar. She had no idea containment holes were already being monitored. I stood there, heart pounding, thinking about every nervous glance she gave earlier, every time she looked behind us, every car she watched, every time she adjusted her chair to face exits. She wasn't nervous because of me. She was nervous because she thought the police were coming. She thought she outran them. She didn't. She kept whispering to the officers that she didn't mean to scare her ex. She said she just needed to talk to him, that he blocked her, that she didn't know what else to do. Her voice cracked more with every sentence until she stopped talking altogether. She let them cuff her without fighting. People stared like we were some soap opera playing out Live. One officer asked for my details just to confirm I wasn't involved. I said I barely knew her, which was true, but I felt guilty even saying it. I couldn't look away from her as they led her to the car. She still didn't look at me, not once. The moment the police car drove off, the bar noise slowly returned. People pretended to go back to their food, but I could feel their eyes on me. Whispering, guessing, judging. I sat down, but I couldn't even finish my drink. Everything felt heavy and unreal. On the walk home, I kept replaying everything. The scanning eyes, the shaking hands, the constant checking over her shoulder. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of getting caught. And I was sitting right beside her like part of the background of her meltdown. The craziest part, she unmatched me before the officers even put her in the car. I don't know how she managed that so fast, but when I checked, her profile was already gone, deleted like she never existed. Now every time someone seems a bit nervous, I second-guess everything. Not everyone who twitches or fidgets is hiding something, but I've seen what real panic looks like now, and it's the kind that tells you they didn't show up to meet you. They showed up to hide. That whole evening felt cursed from the second I stepped into the cinema lobby. Not in some dramatic horror movie way, just in that subtle off feeling you can't explain. The lights felt too bright, the air smelled like old nachos and burnt sugar, and the queue moved slower than anyone alive should tolerate. I kept telling myself I was being dramatic because it was just a simple date with a guy who seemed normal enough online. He met me near the ticket machines, smiling like he'd been waiting longer than he admitted. He had that casual look. Hoodie, trainers, hair slightly messy like he ran his hands through it too much. But he wasn't weird. He hugged me lightly, bought popcorn, and kept making jokes about how he hoped the movie wasn't trash. Everything felt fine. Totally fine. We walked into the screen room right as the advert started. He picked seats near the middle, the kind of seats with a perfect view, but far enough from people that you don't feel their elbows touching yours. The room smelled like warm popcorn and carpet cleaner. The lights dimmed. The film started, we settled in. For the first 20 minutes, everything was normal. He whispered random comments sometimes, nothing annoying, just casual date stuff. He didn't try anything weird, didn't inch his hand closer, didn't make the moment awkward. I remember thinking he might actually be one of the rare decent ones on Tinder. But then he started doing this thing with his jacket. He kept adjusting it across his lap. Not like he was cold, more like he was covering something. I saw a faint glow under the fabric for half a second and thought maybe it was his phone. I was about to nudge him and tell him to put it away because the light was distracting, but he moved the jacket again and the glow disappeared. I ignored it. I told myself not to be paranoid. A few minutes later, I heard the slightest click. Not loud, not obvious, but clear enough that I noticed. I glanced to the side and saw his hand inside his jacket like he was holding something steady. The fabric was pulled strangely tight around whatever was underneath. He was barely blinking, eyes fixed on the screen too intensely. I leaned back slightly, suddenly aware of how stiff he'd become. He wasn't reacting to the movie anymore. He was focused on something else entirely. That uneasy buzz hit my stomach again. Before I could whisper anything, 2 small red dots appeared on the cinema wall. Barely noticeable, but I'd seen them before on news segments about cinema piracy. Tiny detection lasers used by staff to spot recording devices. Panic crawled up my spine. I didn't want to assume anything, but the glow, the clicking, the jacket, it all made sense now. I sat there frozen, trying to decide whether to pretend I didn't notice or to move. But it didn't matter, because everything exploded at once. The movie suddenly paused. Lights flickered on. That low hum of people murmuring filled the room instantly. Confusion, annoyance, whispers. I blinked at the sudden brightness, heart pounding. Then 2 staff members walked in. Behind them, 2 officers. My date's entire body stiffened like he'd been unplugged. He slowly slid his hand out of his jacket, but it was way too late. The staff walked straight toward our row. My chest felt tight enough to crack. They called out his seat number, his description, his hoodie, his hair. Everything matched him perfectly. He didn't even try to fake confusion. He didn't pretend it wasn't him. He just stared forward, completely still. People around us shifted in their seats, whispering louder now. One officer leaned down and asked him to stand. He finally moved. As he stood, the jacket slid off his lap and the small camera he'd been hiding clattered onto the seat. Not a phone. An actual tiny camera with a lens taped over and wires tucked under his hoodie. The officer picked it up, holding it with this annoyed familiarity like they'd seen this setup 100 times. My face burned. I felt trapped between embarrassment and actual fear. The staff explained the alarms flagged a recording device seconds after he activated it. Apparently cinemas have hidden sensors that detect the exact frequency of illegal recording. They'd been watching from the control room since the moment he started. He didn't argue, didn't protest, didn't say a single word. One officer held his arm while the other gathered the camera, batteries, and whatever other bits he had shoved into his pockets. He looked at me only once, this weird guilty glance, like he wanted to apologize, but knew it wouldn't matter. The entire room was dead silent except for the sound of him being escorted out. I sat there staring at the half-crushed popcorn tub between my knees, trying not to cry out of sheer second-hand humiliation. I didn't know what to do, stay seated, and watch the rest of the movie, or leave before someone thought I was part of whatever he was doing. The staff came back and told me I wasn't in trouble. They said they could refund my ticket or let me stay. I nodded without really processing anything. I left the cinema because the idea of sitting there pretending to enjoy the rest of the film felt impossible. Outside, I saw him in the lobby surrounded by officers. They were questioning him, holding his camera inside a clear evidence bag. He looked smaller now, like everything confident about him had melted away. I slipped past them quietly, not wanting him to see me again. When I got home, I checked Tinder. His profile was gone. Unmatched automatically or deleted, either way, wiped from existence. I kept replaying the night in my head, the glow, the clicking, the lasers, the way he froze. Part of me kept wondering if he ever intended to actually watch the movie, or if the whole date was just a cover to make him look less suspicious in case he got caught. Maybe I was just a prop, a distraction, something to make him blend in with the crowd. And now every time I walk into a cinema, I can't relax. I keep looking around, checking for red dots, checking for people hiding cameras under jackets, checking for that same too intense stare at the screen. Because now I know some people don't go to watch the movie. They go to steal it. She seemed completely fine when we matched. Pretty, funny, quick replies, a little sarcastic, but in a way that made the chat feel easy. She suggested drinks at this cozy bar in town, one of those places with dim yellow lights, plants hanging everywhere, and music that's loud enough to drown awkward silences but not loud enough to make you yell. I got there before her because I overthink everything and would rather wait than have someone else waiting for me. She arrived 10 minutes later wearing this oversized gray jumper and jeans, hair tied up in this messy way that somehow still looked good. She smiled like she recognized me from somewhere, even though we'd never met in our lives, and she sat down across from me like we were already mid-conversation. Everything felt smooth at first. We ordered drinks. She teased me about choosing the safest option on the menu. I teased her back for ordering something she admitted she couldn't pronounce. She laughed a lot, but not forced. Not fake. Just easy. She was confident without being rude, flirty without being over the top, and she kept leaning forward like she was genuinely interested in everything I said. I remember thinking the date was going way too well for a random Tinder meetup on a weekday. She kept checking her bag, though. Not her phone, her bag. She'd open it slightly, glance inside, then close it again like she was making sure something was still there. I thought maybe she had anxiety meds or something personal she didn't want to lose. I didn't question it. People carry weird things sometimes. Halfway through our second drink, she said she needed the toilet. She left her jumper on the chair but took her bag with her, which I didn't think twice about. She walked toward the back of the bar, blending into the crowd. That's when everything shifted. The bar door opened and 2 officers walked in, then a third, then a detective-looking guy with a notebook. They weren't smiling. They weren't relaxed. They weren't casual. They were searching the room the second they stepped inside. My stomach tightened instantly. The staff froze. A guy at the bar slowly slid his drink away from his mouth. Even the music felt quieter, even though it didn't actually change. One of the officers stepped forward and spoke to the bartender. I didn't hear what was said, but the bartender nodded and pointed toward the seating area, toward me, toward where I was sitting. My heart dropped like a stone. The officers approached, not running but moving fast enough that my hands instantly went sweaty. They stopped right at my table. One of them asked if I was here with someone. I said yes, she just went to the toilet. I could barely get the words out. They asked what she was wearing. I described her outfit. They exchanged a look that made my whole body go cold. The detective leaned in slightly and told me to stay seated for a moment. He said they were here responding to multiple reports about a woman matching her description. My chest was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. He explained that she had been posing as someone else for months. Different names, different profiles, different stories. She targeted guys through dating apps, met them once, gained trust fast, and then used their info to set up scam accounts. She'd already been caught on CCTV picking up parcels under someone else's identity. One guy lost over $300. Another had loans opened in his name. Another had his email hacked. And now they knew she was still active. Still meeting people. Still using fake names. I sat there frozen, staring at the empty space where her jumper sat on the chair. The detective said they tracked her phone to this exact bar, that they saw movement on an account she was using, that someone recognized her from a recent police alert and tipped them off. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Then one officer went toward the toilets. The other 2 spread out across the bar. The detective stayed with me, probably to keep me from leaving or maybe to keep me safe. I still don't know which. I could hear the officer calling her name quietly down the hallway. I didn't even know her real name. The one she gave me might have been fake too. After a minute, the officer came back. He said she wasn't in the toilets, wasn't in the hallway, wasn't anywhere at all. That's when the bartender spoke up and said he saw her slip out the back exit 5 minutes earlier, the exact moment she excused herself to go to the toilet. She didn't go to the toilet. She went out the back door. She left me sitting there like an idiot while she escaped through the delivery exit. The officers rushed out the back. The detective followed. The whole bar was staring at me like I'd brought trouble inside. I kept my eyes on the half-empty drink she left behind, trying to understand how someone so normal, so chill, so believable could be capable of something that calculated. 20 minutes later, one of the officers came back to tell me they didn't catch her. She disappeared into the streets before they could even spot her. He asked if I could describe everything, how she talked, how she walked, any small detail. I tried, but the more I talked, the more I realized how carefully she crafted herself. Everything she told me might have been fake. Every story, every detail, every expression. She probably used the date as a distraction while she monitored something else. Maybe she planned to scam me later. Maybe she already had. Maybe she just needed to use the bar's Wi-Fi. I don't know. I still don't know. They took my name and told me to check my bank accounts, my email, everything. They said if she asked questions about my address or my full name earlier, I should take it seriously. When they finally left, the whole bar felt different. The lights felt colder. The music felt wrong. The drink in front of me felt disgusting. I paid and walked out immediately, feeling like the ground wasn't steady. I checked my accounts when I got home. Nothing strange. At least not yet. Her Tinder profile was already gone. Wiped. Deleted. Vanished. Like she never existed. Now every time someone asks to me for drinks, I get this heavy feeling in my gut because I know now how good some people are at pretending. How easy it is to sit across from someone who isn't even the person you think you matched with. I shouldn't trusted the weird feeling I had walking toward the food stalls that day. It wasn't fear or anything dramatic, just that small, uneasy buzz in the back of your mind that whispers slow down. I ignored it because the date seemed simple, harmless. He picked a busy outdoor market, broad daylight, people everywhere. Nothing about that screams danger. If anything, it felt too normal. I got there a bit early and saw him already waiting near one of the stalls. He waved when he saw me, smiling like he'd been standing there excited for ages. He had a takeaway container in his hand and a drink balanced awkwardly against his chest. He joked about being too hungry to wait and said he went ahead and ordered something so he didn't faint before I arrived. I laughed because who doesn't grab food early sometimes? It didn't feel weird. We walked around for a bit, talking casually while he finished his food. He wasn't awkward, just slightly too fast with his words, like he felt pressured to fill every silence. His eyes kept darting around the market, not in a paranoid way, more like he was easily distracted. I didn't think anything of it. Some people are just fidgety. After a few minutes, we went to the same stall he got his food from because I said the smell was too good to ignore. The guy working there gave me a smile, but he looked at my date with this tighter expression, almost annoyed. I thought maybe he was just tired or the lunch rush stressed him out. I ordered and stepped aside to wait. My date kept trying to tell me some story about his dog knocking over a lamp, but he kept losing his train of thought. He'd say half a sentence, glance behind him, then pick up somewhere else. Something felt off, but I didn't know what. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he had something on his mind. Maybe I was imagining it. When my food was ready, the stall worker leaned slightly forward and said quietly, almost too quietly, to stay nearby for a moment. I didn't understand what he meant, so I just nodded awkwardly. My date didn't notice because he was too busy checking his phone. That's when everything changed. A police car pulled into the narrow lane of the market. Slow, steady, not with sirens, but with that heavy presence that makes everyone turn their head. 2 officers got out. One of them spoke to a vendor, pointing in our direction. The vendor pointed straight at us. My heart dropped instantly. The officers started walking toward the stall. Not running, not shouting, but walking like they already knew exactly who they were looking for. My date didn't notice until they were 10 steps away. I felt him tense beside me, like his whole body froze before his brain caught up. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just stared at them approaching. The officer in front said his name. He didn't deny it. He didn't pretend it wasn't him. He just whispered "yeah" in the quietest voice possible. And that's when the stall worker spoke up, loud now, confident, saying he had called about a fraudulent payment just minutes earlier. My date could tap a card, rushed away before the machine finished processing, and the moment it declined, the stall worker tried to get his attention, but he was already walking off to meet me. The card owner had reported it stolen earlier that morning. The system flagged it instantly. The worker had seen my date nearby still waiting for me, so he called it in the second he realized. My date's face went pale. He said it wasn't what it looked like, that it wasn't a big deal, that he found the card on the ground. But the officers didn't entertain any of it. They asked him to step aside and show them the card. He hesitated, then finally pulled it from his pocket. It wasn't just one card. It was 3. My stomach twisted so hard I felt sick. The officers told him to turn around. They put cuffs on him right there in front of me, in front of the whole queue, in front of families and food vendors and random people eating noodles on the curb. The whole market went silent. You could literally hear the oil frying behind the stall. That's how quiet everything became. My date kept saying he was sorry, not to the officers, to me. over and over, sorry, sorry, sorry. Like he thought an apology would erase the fact that he brought me straight into a situation where he was about to be arrested. One officer pulled me aside and asked if I came with him. I explained everything, that we matched online, that this was our first time meeting, that he'd already been there eating when I arrived. The officer nodded and told me I wasn't involved in anything. He sounded almost sorry for me. My date didn't look back at me when they escorted him toward the car. He kept his head down the whole time. The stall worker looked at me with this sympathetic half shrug, like he knew I had nothing to do with it. I stood there holding my food container that didn't even feel warm anymore. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. People kept staring, whispering. Some shook their heads like they were judging me too. Once the police car drove off, the normal noise of the market slowly returned. Sizzling pans, clattering trays, people trying to act like nothing happened. I threw my food away because just the smell made my stomach twist even more. I walked home feeling like the world tilted sideways. The worst part wasn't even the arrest. It was the realization that he knew. He knew the whole time. The way he kept checking behind him. The way he rushed ordering his food. The way he panicked slightly every time someone walked close. I thought he was nervous about the date. He was nervous because he was waiting to get caught. That whole time he smiled at me, he had stolen cards in his pocket. That whole time he joked. He was watching over his shoulder. That whole time I thought he was being sweet. He was trying to act normal while sitting on top of a crime he committed minutes before I showed up. And he brought me into the middle of it without blinking. I unmatched him the moment I got home. Not that it mattered. I'm pretty sure he wasn't getting his phone back anytime soon. I swear the date started out so normal it almost felt boring. Like one of those meetups where nothing crazy is gonna happen and you already know you'll go home thinking, yeah, that was fine, I guess. She picked this small bar that wasn't loud or packed, just this chilled tiny place with dim lights and mismatched chairs. I got there early because I didn't want to look rushed, and I sat by the window scrolling while pretending not to overthink what she'd look like in real life. She walked in a few minutes later, smiling like she'd spotted me from the door. She looked the same as her pictures, maybe a bit more tired, but that didn't bother me. She hugged me in that friendly way some people do when they want to skip the awkward start, and we got drinks straight away. Everything felt calm. That comfortable kind of first date awkwardness where you're both trying to pretend you're not analyzing every tiny detail. She asked about my job, I asked about hers. We joked about how weird Tinder can be. Nothing deep, nothing intense. She laughed a lot, but in the stiff way like she was pushing the laugh out too fast. I noticed she kept glancing at her phone under the table. Not obsessively, but enough that I clocked it. I figured maybe she was nervous or checking on a friend. Then halfway through her drink, she went weirdly quiet. She just stared at me for a second too long, eyes squinting slightly like she was trying to line up my face with some image in her mind. I tried to joke about the lighting being bad, but she didn't laugh this time. She just said nothing and looked back down at her phone. Things felt tense for like 5 minutes, but I didn't know why. I thought maybe she wasn't feeling the date anymore, or maybe I said something wrong. She kept nodding at random things I said like she wasn't listening. She wasn't present at all, just staring at her screen and then at me like she was comparing something. And then, this is the part that still makes my stomach twist. The bar door opened and 3 officers walked in. Not loud, not running, but moving with purpose. My drink froze halfway to my mouth. They scanned the bar once, and then one of them said my name, loudly, sharp, clear. The whole place went silent instantly. Even the bartender stopped pouring a drink. I genuinely thought they had the wrong person, that they meant someone else, that someone behind me had the same name. I literally looked over my shoulder expecting another guy to raise his hand, but there was no one behind me. And then the officer repeated my name again. My date pushed her chair back slightly, not even subtly, more like guilt, like she already knew what was happening. My heart started pounding like someone hit a switch inside me. The officers walked straight to our table and asked me to stand up. Everyone stared. Some people whispered. I could feel every single pair of eyes burning into me like I'd been exposed for something I didn't even understand. One officer asked me to move my hands slowly. Another asked if I had any weapons. I said no, voice cracking because I was confused out of my mind. My date looked down at her lap, not saying a single word. Then one of the officers turned to her and asked if she was the caller. Call her. My brain flipped. She nodded. My stomach dropped all the way to the floor. He asked her to confirm what she reported, and she said in this shaky, embarrassed voice as she recognized me from a true crime TikTok she watched earlier that week. Some video about a guy wanted for scamming people and running from police in a different city. She said I matched the description too closely and that I was acting suspicious. Acting suspicious. Me, the guy who asked her about her favorite pasta 5 minutes earlier. She told him she didn't feel safe and thought it was better to report it quietly in case I tried something. She said she didn't want to make a scene. Well, the scene was very much happening now. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her what part of me gave serial TikTok criminal energy. I wanted to tell the officers this was insane. But I just stood there shaking while they checked my ID, checked their system, asked me where I lived, asked me where I worked, asked if I had been in the city shown in the video. I hadn't. And it didn't take long for them to confirm I wasn't the guy at all. The detective explained the TikTok clip she saw was over a year old, and the suspect had already been caught months ago. I looked nothing like him apart from having the same hair length and being roughly the same height. That was it. That was all it took for her to panic enough to call the police on me. When they finally stepped back and told me I was free to go, the entire bar felt like it was staring through me. I could feel the embarrassment in my bones. My date looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. She kept saying she wasn't trying to ruin the night. She just got scared because I resembled him in certain angles. Certain angles. I didn't even respond. I just grabbed my jacket with shaking hands and walked out. The officers apologized quietly for the chaos, but honestly, none of them were the problem. It was her. Her and her stupid TikTok detective brain. I walked down the street feeling like I just lived through a nightmare I didn't sign up for. My phone buzzed with her messages apologizing, saying she panicked, saying she felt stupid, saying she didn't mean for it to go that far, saying she didn't expect officers to actually show up. I didn't answer any of them. I unmasked her before I even got home. The worst part wasn't even the officers or the attention or the humiliation. It was how she kept staring at me earlier. That analyzing look, that calculating stare, like she was studying my face for clues, like she was waiting to see if I'd slip up. Now I can't go on a date without wondering if the person across from me is secretly Googling my name under the table or comparing my face to some TikTok criminal. Because one girl actually called the police on me for nothing more than bad lighting and paranoia. I don't even know why I agreed to meet him. I think I was bored, honestly. His profile looked clean, normal, nothing weird. He had the usual outdoorsy pictures, a mirror selfie that wasn't cringe, and one where he held a camera. He mentioned he liked photography and wanted to capture real people instead of boring landscapes. I didn't think anything of it. Everyone online has a hobby they hype up. We talked for a few days before he asked if I wanted to meet up so he could take some pictures of me. He said he liked taking portraits and I had the right vibe for the kind of shots he wanted. Normally I'd say no, but he didn't word it creepy, and he kept things casual. He said we'd meet at a public place, nothing weird, just a chill mini photo shoot if I was comfortable. I said fine. I told myself it would be quick and harmless. We met outside this quiet park that wasn't busy at all. Not dead, but definitely not packed. He waved when he saw me, and he had one of those big cameras hanging across his chest. He smiled like he was genuinely happy I came. He talked calmly, not awkward, but slightly too excited about the camera settings he kept messing with. He kept saying the lighting was perfect today, that the clouds were helping soften things, and that he wanted to try some shots near the trees. I followed him down one of the walking paths. He kept stopping to look at corners, benches, random patches of grass, imagining how a photo would look. I wasn't nervous, just unsure what exactly he wanted from me. He wasn't flirty, which honestly made me relax a bit. He told me to stand near a bench and pretend I was looking at my shoes. Then he asked me to sit on the grass and look away. Then he wanted a shot of me tying my hair. Normal stuff, nothing that crossed a line. But the entire time, something felt slightly off. Nothing obvious, just small things. Like how he kept stepping back too far and take pictures, even when it wasn't necessary. Or how he never showed me any of the shots he took. Or how he would suddenly lift the camera and snap something without warning, even if I wasn't posing. I tried to ignore it because I didn't want to assume the worst. He didn't touch me, didn't say anything uncomfortable, didn't stand too close. But the longer we walked, the more restless he became. He kept looking around like he was checking exits. He held the camera tight against his chest whenever we passed people, like he didn't want anyone to see the screen. After about 30 minutes, he asked if we could walk further into the park where it was quieter so he could do the real shots. That's when I finally felt a proper warning in my chest. I told him maybe we should stay where there were more people. He didn't argue, but he looked disappointed in a way that didn't feel right. We headed back toward the main path, and I thought maybe things were going to stay normal. Until the officers showed up. I heard footsteps behind us. Fast, heavy, purposeful. I thought maybe people were jogging. I turned slightly and froze when I saw 3 officers walking quickly toward us. Not running, but not casual either. The kind of walk that means they're here with a reason. My heart sank instantly. One of them called his name. Loudly, clearly, sharp enough that birds flew off a tree nearby. He stopped moving. Not gradually, instantly, like someone pressed pause on him. His shoulders stiffened, and he lowered his camera slowly like he didn't want to make any sudden movement. I stepped back because everything about the moment felt wrong, like I had walked straight into a situation I had no idea existed. The officers reached us in seconds. One told him to put the camera down gently. Another stood between him and me, blocking me completely. They treated him like someone they were already familiar with, someone they'd dealt with before. He didn't say a word. The officer closest to me asked if I came here willingly. I said yes, but my voice shook because I didn't know what was happening. He nodded and told me to step aside while I spoke to him. The detective, because he wasn't just a normal officer, he had that detective posture, that calm seriousness, told him they received another complaint earlier that morning. Another one. The way he emphasized that word made my stomach twist. They said he'd been stopped multiple times in the past few months for taking pictures of strangers without their consent. Not random street photography, targeted photography. Following people, waiting for them to turn, catching their faces at specific angles, saving the pictures in hidden folders, editing their faces onto other scenes, sending some anonymously, keeping others for reasons no one understood. Apparently today someone had spotted him taking pictures of 2 teenage girls near the entrance of the park before I arrived and reported it immediately. Security footage had matched his clothes and camera. The officers were already looking for him when they saw us. My chest tightened so hard I felt lightheaded. I looked at him and he still wasn't fighting. He wasn't angry. He wasn't confused. He just looked defeated, like he'd been waiting for this moment. The detective opened his camera and scrolled through the gallery while the other officers kept him still. I couldn't see the screen, but I saw the detective's face. It changed instantly. His jaw tightened. His brows lowered. He turned the camera slightly toward the other officers, and they all reacted the same, a short, sharp inhale. I knew then that whatever was on that camera wasn't normal pictures. It wasn't just portraits of me. It wasn't just casual stranger shots. The detective didn't even bother asking him more questions. He cuffed him right there on the path while people walking past slowed down, whispering, staring. The officer guarding me kept saying I wasn't in any trouble, and that I could leave once they took his details. They led him away, the camera sealed in an evidence bag. He didn't look at me once, didn't explain anything, didn't apologize. He walked like someone who had been caught doing something he couldn't defend. One of the officers walked me back toward the entrance and told me gently that I should be careful meeting people who insist on taking pictures on the first meet. He said that in most cases it's harmless, but sometimes it isn't. I walked home shaking, not scared of him physically, but disturbed by how normal he acted. How calm, how friendly. How he laughed at my jokes while carrying a camera full of pictures I wasn't meant to be anywhere near. When I got home, his profile was already gone, unmatched, deleted, like he wiped himself out before the consequences hit. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined the pictures on that memory card. Not just mine, the others, the ones taken before me, the ones taken without anyone realizing. That's what stuck with me the most. How close I came to becoming just another file in a folder he hoped no one would ever open. It wasn't even a big date. Just a simple hangout at her flat after a week of talking. She seemed normal online. Funny, quick replies, not too clingy, not too dry. She sent voice notes, talked about her pets, her job, her favorite shows. Nothing about her gave off weird vibes. If anything, she seemed more chilled than most people I matched with. She told me to meet her outside her building because she was still tidying up a bit. I didn't think twice about it. I grabbed my jacket, walked the 10 minutes to her road, and found the block easily. It wasn't a bad area at all. Not fancy, not sketchy. Just one of those long rows of flats where everyone's curtains look exactly the same and you can hear someone's TV through the window. I texted her that I was outside, and she texted back saying give her 2 minutes. No panic, no rush, just casual. So I waited, leaned against the wall by the entrance, checked my phone, fixed my hair and my camera. Normal stuff. That's when I heard footsteps. Not just footsteps, running. Fast running. Heavy shoes slamming the pavement. I looked up thinking maybe some kids were messing about or someone missed their bus, but it wasn't that. 3 officers sprinted past the end of the pavement, all wearing vests, radios out, focused in a way that instantly made my chest tighten. I stepped aside because I didn't want to be in their way, but they were already rushing straight toward the block I was standing in front of. For 1 second, I honestly thought they were coming for someone behind me. Maybe some neighbor. Maybe one of the top floor flats. I stepped even further back, letting them push through the entrance of the building. Then I heard someone shout her flat number. Her flat number. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there staring at the officers rushing up the stairs inside the building, shouting instructions to each other, boots hitting every step like they were in a chase scene. Her flat was only on the first floor, so it didn't take long before I heard pounding on her door. Loud, heavy, serious banging. I froze outside, completely stuck between walking away and waiting. Part of me thought they had the wrong door, the wrong flat, the wrong woman. It had to be a mistake. She didn't seem like the type to be in trouble, let alone whatever this was. Then everything happened too fast. The officers forced the door open. I heard shouting, not screaming, but fast orders, fast voices, all overlapping. Someone yelled for her to keep her hands visible. Another one said something about a warning. I stood there outside, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. After a few seconds, I felt like 10 minutes it'd run her out. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She just looked. Blank. Completely blank. Like she wasn't surprised at all. As if she expected them eventually. She kept her eyes down, not looking at anyone, not saying a word. Her hair was messy. She wasn't wearing shoes, just socks. One of the officers held her arms while another walked beside them. I stepped forward slightly, not even sure why. Maybe I thought she'd explain something. Maybe she'd see me and say it was all a misunderstanding. But she didn't even look in my direction. One officer stayed behind and started talking quietly into his radio, confirming they had her. He said they were bringing her in for questioning related to a harassment case. That the victim had filed a report earlier that morning. Something about repeated calls, showing up near his workplace, leaving notes on his windshield. The victim told him she was someone he'd matched with online, someone he met once and blocked afterward because she became too intense. My chest felt tight. My hands started sweating. Everything around me felt unreal. Then the officer said the part that made everything snap into place. The victim told him she'd been trying to find him all week, and they tracked her phone to this location. This building. This flat. The flat I was literally about to walk into. I couldn't even speak. I just stood there staring at her as they walked her toward the police car. She never looked up, never looked at me, never looked at anything. Her face stayed empty the whole time, like she'd already left her own body. When they reached the street, neighbors started poking their heads out of windows. Some whispered, some filmed, some just stared. I stepped back even more because I didn't want anyone thinking I was part of whatever happened. One officer finally approached me. He must recognize that I was waiting for someone because he asked if I lived there. I told him no, I was meeting someone. He asked who. I said her name. He sighed quietly and told me I wasn't in any trouble, but I should probably head home. I nodded instantly. The officer didn't go into details, but he said the guy she had been stalking was terrified. She followed him for days after he blocked her, waited near his street, left things outside his house, tried contacting his friends. Apparently she had been spiraling for a while. The report they filed was serious enough for immediate action. I walked away from the building without looking back. The air felt heavy. The whole street felt different, like I had accidentally walked into the edge of someone else's nightmare. By the time I reached my road, she had unmatched me. Deleted? Vanished, like she'd never existed. My phone still had her messages, though. The ones she sent earlier about being excited to meet, about cleaning her flat, about making sure I text when I arrived. None of it felt real anymore. I keep thinking about how easily I could have been inside that flat when the police stormed in. How close I was to walking into a situation I didn't understand. How her calm messages hid something completely different happening in her head. Now when someone on Tinder says, "Come to my flat," I get this deep uneasy feeling like the pavement memory is still stuck in me. Because I know what it looks like when someone matches with you while their life is falling apart behind their front door. Ashim canceled the second he said the word studio. Something about it sounded too vague, too try-hard, like he was trying to impress me before we even met. But I'd been talking to him for a few days and he didn't seem weird in the chat. He was always quick to reply, funny, calm, not pushing anything. He said he worked in this shared creative building and had his own little studio space where he liked to paint and chill. He made it sound safe and casual, like it was normal for people our age to hang out in places like that. I had never been to that part of town before. The building looked old from the outside, like an old factory someone tried to turn trendy but gave up halfway. Faded red bricks, tall dusty windows, metal doors that didn't match. He met me at the entrance and buzzed us in with one of those fobs only tenants have. He looked excited to show me around, almost proud, and I didn't want to ruin the mood by asking too many questions. Inside, it smelled like old paint, warm pipes, and dust. The hallways were long with concrete floors, and half the lights flickered. He kept saying the place had character, which usually means it's falling apart, but you pretend it's artsy. We went up 3 floors, through 2 different hallways, then down this narrow corridor that honestly looked like somewhere a horror game would start. His studio was at the very end. The second he opened the door, I knew something was off. Studios I've seen online always have big open spaces, canvases, shelves, bright windows. This one looked like a tiny flat someone tried to hide inside an office building. Mattress on the floor, clothes in a pile, small fridge humming loudly, 2 sinks that didn't match the room at all, a microwave sitting on a stack of crates. Barely any art supplies except a few brushes and a cup and 1 cheap canvas leaning against the wall. There was no way this was legal. I stepped inside slowly, pretending to look around while my brain was screaming at me that something wasn't right. He shut the door behind us and started talking about his projects, but none of it made sense. Every corner of the room looked lived in, not worked in. He kept dodging the details when I asked about his job or how long he'd been in the building. He said things like, "Don't worry about it," or "It's complicated," or "It's temporary." He offered me a drink from the fridge, but I said no because the fridge smelled like someone had unplugged it 3 times in the same week. I sat on the only chair he had while he sat on the mattress like that was normal for a first meetup. The more he talked, the more I realized he wasn't relaxed. He was nervous, jumpy, constantly glancing at the door like he expected someone to knock at any moment. I tried to keep the conversation going, but the room felt like it was shrinking. The air was stuffy. The pipes above us kept making weird clanking sounds. The lights flickered every few minutes. I kept telling myself I'd stay 10 more minutes, then politely leave. And then everything blew up. Loud banging. Once. Twice. Then a whole storm of fists pounding on metal. Before I could even ask what was happening, the door burst open so hard it slammed into the wall. I jumped up from the chair so fast it almost fell. Officers poured into the room, actual police in vests, shouting at him to get on the floor, shouting at me to move away from him, shouting at everyone at once. My entire body went numb. He froze for half a second like he couldn't believe they found him. Then he tried to stand, but they grabbed him instantly, dragging him off the mattress and pinning him against the floor. He kept saying it wasn't that deep, it wasn't dangerous, he just didn't have anywhere else to go. But the officers weren't listening. One of them opened a little fridge, another kicked a pile of blankets aside, another pointed up at the part of the ceiling where the smoke detector should have been. Except it wasn't a smoke detector anymore. He'd ripped the inside of it out and stuffed the hole with paper and tape. Another one on the opposite wall had wires hanging out dead. That's when the detective walked in, the one clearly in charge. He explained fast, direct, like he repeated this speech dozens of times. The building had fire safety issues for months. Inspectors kept finding blocked alarms, disabled detectors, false wiring, and strange signs someone was living in rooms that weren't meant for living. Each time they got close to figuring it out, the person disappeared for a while, then came back. They finally got enough evidence to storm the building after a neighbor reported strange noises from the vents. They tracked all of it to this one unit. This one room. Him. He'd been secretly living there for months, bypassing every fire safety system so the alarms wouldn't catch the cooking, the heater, the microwave, the candles, the broken wiring, everything that easily could set the whole building on fire with people inside. My heart dropped when I understood just how dangerous it actually was. This wasn't some cute illegal studio. This was a massive safety hazard everyone had been trying to find, and he brought me straight into it. The officers asked me if I came willingly, how long I had known him, if I knew he was living here. I told them I met him online and thought it was a proper studio. One detective nodded like they'd heard that before. They told me to step into the hallway while they finished searching the room. I stood outside shaking, listening to them pulling things apart inside. The fridge, the mattress, the crates, even the vents. More officers rushed past me into other units down the hall, checking if he had anything else hidden in different rooms. When they dragged him out, he didn't look embarrassed. He looked annoyed, disappointed, like they interrupted him doing something more important. He didn't look at me even once as they led him down the hallway in cuffs. One officer walked me downstairs and told me the building wasn't safe for visitors, and they'd been trying to shut these illegal units down for months. She said I was lucky nothing had happened inside. Lucky I wasn't there overnight. Lucky they arrived when they did. That word stuck with me. Lucky. It didn't feel lucky. It felt unreal. It felt wrong. It felt like I accidentally walked straight into someone's hidden life without knowing what I'd stepped on. I left the building as fast as I could. The air outside felt too cold, too sharp, like I had been holding my breath for an hour. I blocked him the second I got home, even though part of me knew I'd never hear from him again. Every time I pass an old building now, brick, dusty windows, flickering lights, I wonder if someone like him is inside, hiding, living, unplugging alarms, waiting for someone clueless to walk through the door thinking it's just a fun, creative space. I still don't know what made me say yes to her that day. Maybe I was bored, maybe I was too curious, or maybe I just didn't want another dead chat turning into nothing. She matched with me late at night and instantly asked if I liked exploring. I said yeah, because who doesn't like to sound interesting? And she replied saying she knew a secret spot no one else goes to. She said it was perfect for a first meet because it was quiet and had a good view. The way she hyped it up made it sound like some hidden gem, like a lookout point or a quiet hill somewhere. She told me we had to meet at a bus stop instead of her dropping the location. She said it was better if she walked me there so I didn't get lost. That should have been weird enough, but I didn't overthink it. People get dramatic about their favorite spots all the time. I met her that afternoon and she looked normal enough. Hoodie, backpack, hair tied up, quick smile. She talked fast, but not in a crazy way, more like she was excited. We walked for a while, and she kept leading the way confidently like she knew the area better than anyone. She kept telling me I was going to be impressed, that everyone she showed it to thought it was sick. She wouldn't explain what it actually was, though. Just kept calling it the spot. The secret spot. She said it like it was sacred or something. As we got further from the main roads, things started feeling strange. She led me down quieter and quieter paths, past empty business buildings, past these tall fences with signs saying keep out, past roads with barely any people. Every time I hesitated, she'd laugh and say to trust her, that we were almost there, that it was worth it. Eventually, she stopped in front of this massive metal gate with a narrow gap between the panels. There were warning signs everywhere. Restricted area, authorized personnel only, no entry. The kind of signs you don't ignore. But she slipped through the gap easily and looked back at me like she expected me to follow without question. My whole body felt tense, but I didn't want to look scared, so I squeezed through behind her. The second my foot hit the gravel on the other side, I knew instantly we weren't supposed to be there. The place was huge. A construction site. Cranes towering overhead, stacks of materials everywhere, half-built structures, temporary fencing, and wires taped along the ground. It didn't look abandoned. It looked active, like people actually worked there during the day, like we're trespassing somewhere serious. She grinned and said the view on the other side was insane. She said all we had to do was climb this short hill of dirt and we'd see everything. She walked ahead like she'd done it 1,000 times, not even checking if anyone was around. I was still frozen near the gate, trying to understand why she acted like this was a casual park. Then I heard it. A loud metallic clunk, followed by a high-pitched alarm that echoed across the entire site. She turned around instantly, eyes wide, like she did not expect that at all. The alarm got louder and louder until you could feel it vibrating through the ground. I backed up, heart pounding, looking around like something was about to explode. She whispered that she didn't think the alarms were still active, that she'd been here before with no issues. She sounded panicked now, really panicked. I barely had time to respond when a voice boomed across the site telling us to stay where we were. I looked toward the far side of the site and saw 2 figures sprinting through one of the metal gates, then 2 more from another side. Officers. Actual officers. Their vests reflective, radios in hand, yelling directions at each other as they closed in on us. My stomach completely dropped. She grabbed my arm like she wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. The fences were too tall, the gates locked, and the gap we came through was tiny. Even if we tried, it would have caught us in seconds. They were approaching from every direction, surrounding us like they practiced this exact setup before. She let go of my arm and started breathing fast, pulling at her hoodie like she was overheating. She kept mumbling that she didn't know the alarms would trigger, that she didn't think anyone monitored the site on weekends, that she'd been here so many times with no issues. The officers reached us in under 30 seconds. One of them told us to sit down on the ground and keep our hands visible. I was so shocked I didn't even argue. I sat down on the cold gravel while the alarm continued screaming around us. She dropped to her knees beside me, shaking. One officer asked us how we got in. The other asked if we knew we were trespassing on a secured zone. He said the site had been hit multiple times by vandals lately, so they upgraded their system and installed sensors. Apparently, we triggered one by walking too close to the materials area. The officers kept questioning her specifically, how she found the place, whether she'd been here before, whether she was the one they caught on earlier footage climbing the fence a few nights ago. That's when I realized she hadn't been here with people. She'd been here alone, sneaking in, multiple times. She didn't deny anything. She didn't explain anything. She just kept saying she didn't think it would be a big deal. She looked so pale I thought she might faint. The officers checked both our IDs, wrote down our details, and told her she might be called in for further questioning because the footage they had looked a lot like her. They told me I most likely wasn't in trouble since it was clear she brought me here and I didn't know where we were going. The officers finally walked us out after 20 long minutes. The alarm stopped only when we stepped through the main gate. The silence afterward felt heavier than the noise. She didn't say a word to me as we left the area. Not sorry, not an explanation, nothing. She kept her head down like she wanted to disappear. When we reached the main road, she mumbled something about needing to go home and walked off without looking back. That night, she unmatched me. Her profile disappeared completely. No trace. Nothing. I sat on my bed replaying everything. How casual she acted. How she dragged me into a restricted construction site like it was some cool secret. How she didn't warn me once. How we almost got arrested because she wanted to show off a spot she had no business being in. How she looked terrified only when the consequences finally showed up. Since then, anytime someone mentions a secret spot, I feel my whole body tense up. Because now all I can think about is alarms, flashing lights, and officers surrounding me before I even knew what was happening. I still don't know what made me say yes to her that day. Maybe I was bored, maybe I was too curious, or maybe I just didn't want another dead chat turning into nothing. She matched with me late at night and instantly asked if I liked exploring. I said yeah because who doesn't like to sound interesting, and she replied saying she knew a secret spot no one else goes to. She said it was perfect for a first meet because it was quiet and had a good view. The way she hiked it up made it sound like some hidden gem, like a lookout point or a quiet hill somewhere. She told me we had to meet at a bus stop instead of her dropping the location. She said it was better if she walked me there so I didn't get lost. That should have been weird enough, but I didn't overthink it. People get dramatic about their favorite spots all the time. I met her that afternoon, and she looked normal enough. Hoodie, backpack, hair tied up, quick smile. She talked fast, but not in a crazy way, more like she was excited. We walked for a while, and she kept leading the way confidently, like she knew the area better than anyone. She kept telling me I was going to be impressed, that everyone she showed it to thought it was sick. She wouldn't explain what it actually was, though. Just kept calling it the spot. The secret spot. She said it like it was sacred or something. As we got further from the main roads, things started feeling strange. She led me down quieter and quieter paths, past empty business buildings, past these tall fences with signs saying "keep out," past roads with barely any people. Every time I hesitated, she'd laugh and say to trust her, that we were almost there, that it was worth it. Eventually, she stopped in front of this massive metal gate with a narrow gap between the panels. There were warning signs everywhere: restricted area, authorized personnel only, no entry. The kind of signs you don't ignore. But she slipped through the gap easily and looked back at me like she expected me to follow without question. My whole body felt tense, but I didn't want to look scared, so I squeezed through behind her. The second my foot hit the gravel on the other side, I knew instantly we weren't supposed to be there. The place was huge. A construction site. Cranes towering overhead, stacks of materials everywhere, half-built structures, temporary fencing, and wires taped along the ground. It didn't look abandoned. It looked active, like people actually worked there during the day, like we're trespassing somewhere serious. She grinned and said the view on the other side was insane. She said all we had to do was climb this short hill of dirt and we'd see everything. She walked ahead like she'd done it 1,000 times, not even checking if anyone was around. I was still frozen near the gate, trying to understand why she acted like this was a casual park. Then I heard it. A loud metallic clunk, followed by a high-pitched alarm that echoed across the entire site. She turned around instantly, eyes wide, like she did not expect that at all. The alarm got louder and louder until you could feel it vibrating through the ground. I backed up, heart pounding, looking around like something was about to explode. She whispered that she didn't think the alarms were still active, that she'd been here before with no issues. She sounded panicked now, really panicked. I barely had time to respond when a voice boomed across the site telling us to stay where we were. I looked toward the far side of the site and saw 2 figures sprinting through one of the metal gates. Then 2 more from another side. Officers. Actual officers. Their vests reflective, radios in hand, yelling directions at each other as they closed in on us. My stomach completely dropped. She grabbed my arm like she wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. The fences were too tall, the gates locked, and the gap we came through was tiny. Even if we tried, it would have caught us in seconds. They were approaching from every direction, surrounding us like they'd practiced this exact setup before. She let go of my arm and started breathing fast, pulling at her hoodie like she was overheating. She kept mumbling that she didn't know the alarms would trigger, that she didn't think anyone monitored the site on weekends, that she'd been here so many times with no issues. The officers reached us in under 30 seconds. One of them told us to sit down on the ground and keep our hands visible. I was so shocked I didn't even argue. I sat down on the cold gravel while the alarm continued screaming around us. She dropped her knees beside me, shaking. One officer asked us how we got in. The other asked if we knew we were trespassing on a secured zone. He said the site had been hit multiple times by vandals lately, so they upgraded their system and installed sensors. Apparently, we triggered one by walking too close to the materials area. The officers kept questioning her specifically, how she found the place, whether she'd been here before, whether she was the one they caught on earlier footage climbing the fence a few nights ago. That's when I realized she hadn't been here with people. She'd been here alone, sneaking in, multiple times. She didn't deny anything. She didn't explain anything. She just kept saying she didn't think it would be a big deal. She looked so pale I thought she might faint. The officers checked both our IDs, wrote down our details, and told her she might be called in for further questioning because the footage they had looked a lot like her. They told me I most likely wasn't in trouble since it was clear she brought me here and I didn't know where we were going. The officers finally walked us out after 20 long minutes. The alarm stopped only when we stepped through the main gate. The silence afterward felt heavier than the noise. She didn't say a word to me as we left the area. Not sorry, not an explanation, nothing. She kept her head down like she wanted to disappear. When we reached the main road, she mumbled something about needing to go home and walked off without looking back. That night, she unmatched me. Her profile disappeared completely. No trace. Nothing. I sat on my bed replaying everything. How casual she acted. How she dragged me into a restricted construction site like it was some cool secret. How she didn't warn me once. How we almost got arrested because she wanted to show off a spot she had no business being in. How she looked terrified only when the consequences finally showed up. Since then, anytime someone mentions a secret spot, I feel my whole body tense up. Because now all I can think about is alarms, flashing lights, and officers surrounding me before I even knew what was happening. I should have known the day was off from the moment I woke up. Not in some spooky way, just that restless feeling you get when you know you're forcing yourself to socialize, even though your brain is begging for a quiet day. But I'd already agreed to meet her, and I didn't want to cancel because I was tired of being that person who flakes last minute. She seemed normal enough when we matched. Quick replies, playful jokes, nothing strange or clingy. She suggested a picnic at the park and even said she'd bring snacks so I didn't have to worry about anything. The weather was warm, but not too much. That perfect in-between temperature where you don't feel sweaty walking. The sun still feels nice on your arms. I got to the park early because I didn't want to be awkwardly running across the grass with bags in my hands while she waited. I picked a spot under this big tree near the water where the breeze made the leaves shake. It felt peaceful. I remember thinking it might actually be a decent day. She arrived 10 minutes later, walking fast like she was trying to catch a bus. She had a backpack half unzipped, earbuds around her neck, and hair tied up like she'd done it while walking. She sat down quickly and pulled out crisps, sandwiches, drinks, everything thrown together like she packed it in a rush. She talked a lot, but more in a way where her words felt heavy. Like she wasn't just telling stories, she was unloading thoughts she hadn't processed yet. I laughed at some things she said, but I couldn't ignore how restless she was. She kept turning around to look behind us, scanning the path, scanning the benches, scanning the bushes like she expected someone to jump out any second. I asked if she was okay, and she shrugged, saying she just didn't like crowds. But the part of the park we were in wasn't crowded at all. It was mostly families and dog walkers far away from us. After a few minutes, I noticed she kept checking her phone. Not in a normal way, though. She'd read something, lock the screen instantly, then throw the phone on the blanket like she was forcing herself not to look again. Then 2 seconds later, she'd pick it back up. Over and over. It made me feel weird, but I tried to focus on my food instead of overthinking every movement she made. We were mid-conversation about something random when I heard this sharp whistle. Not a normal park whistle. Not someone calling their dog. It was the kind of sharp whistle you hear from someone trying to get another person's attention immediately. I looked up and saw 2 officers walking down the hill toward us. Not rushing, but walking with purpose. One had his hand on his radio, the other scanning the park while talking. My stomach tightened instantly. I told myself they were just patrolling, doing the usual walkthrough. Parks have officers sometimes. Nothing weird about that. But then they kept walking directly toward us. Not around us. Not past us. Straight to our blanket. I looked at her as she froze in the kind of way that told me she already knew what this was about. She didn't even pretend to look confused. She didn't ask questions. She just stared at the grass, jaw clenched so hard I could see it from the side. The officers reached us and said her name. Not mine. Hers. She didn't respond at first. She just held her breath like she could disappear if she stayed still enough. Then one of the officers repeated her name louder and told her she needed to stand up immediately. People nearby stopped walking. A guy sitting with a dog stood up to watch. Some kids on bikes slowed down. One officer explained that they'd had a call 20 minutes earlier. A man nearby had reported someone harassing him in the car park just outside the park, following him, shouting at him, cornering him. He described the girl perfectly. Same clothes, same bag, same hair tied up messy. He said she'd been on a Tinder date with him earlier and freaked out when he said he wasn't feeling a connection. Apparently, she followed him to his car, slapped the window, screamed at him for leading her on, and tried to block his door from closing. And that was only 30 minutes before she walked over to meet me. She didn't deny it. She didn't say anything. She didn't even look up. One officer gently took her arm while the other asked me if I had just met her today. I said yes, and that we matched online. He nodded like he'd heard that 100 times. He said I wasn't in any trouble, but they needed her to come with them because the guy she harassed was scared she might look for him again. She finally spoke then. Her voice was small, shaky, nothing like how she'd sounded earlier. She kept saying she wasn't trying to hurt anyone, she just wanted closure. She just wanted him to hear her out. She said she didn't mean for things to escalate and that she was embarrassed. The officers didn't let go. They kept talking to her calmly, telling her they heard her, but they still needed to take her away to talk somewhere safe. People were still watching. I hated that part the most. Strangers looking at me like I brought trouble into the park, like I was part of all of it. When the officers lifted her backpack and took her toward the path, she didn't look back at me. Not once. She just kept her eyes on the ground, mumbling to herself, hands clenched tight. The officers walked on either side of her, guiding her away like they had done this before with her, like she was familiar with this kind of situation, even if she pretended she wasn't. I sat there frozen, staring at the picnic blanket that suddenly looked stupid and childish, her half-eaten sandwich, her bottle of water knocked over, the grass pressed down where she'd been sitting seconds earlier. Everything felt so quiet even though the park was full of people again. A couple walked by whispering. A dad pulled his kid closer as they passed me, like I was dangerous too, like dating someone you barely know makes you guilty somehow. I packed up everything slowly and walked out of the park with this heavy, useless feeling in my chest. Not fear, not anger, just confusion, disappointment, shock, all mixed together like a bunch of emotions got dropped on the floor and smashed into each other. When I got home, her profile was gone, just like that. Unmatched, deleted, wiped, like she never existed. Like she jumped from one date to the next without letting anyone see what was behind all that nervous talking and restless energy. I didn't even tell my friends. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I was lying. Who meets someone for a picnic and ends up watching them get escorted away for harassing another date literally half an hour earlier? Apparently me. I wasn't even meant to go bowling that night. My friend had canceled plans last minute. I was bored, and my room felt too small to sit in for another evening, so I opened Tinder out of pure boredom. That's when he messaged me. He'd matched with me earlier in the week, but barely talked until that night. He said he was already out near the local bowling alley and asked if I wanted to join him for a few games. Normally I'd say no because meeting someone that fast feels risky, but honestly, I just needed to get out of the house. He looked normal in his pictures. Clean haircut, average clothes, nothing over the top. He typed like someone who wasn't trying to impress but wasn't rude either. I grabbed my jacket and just went before I could overthink it. The bowling alley was buzzing when I got there. Lights flashing, kids screaming, loud music that didn't match the vibe of the place at all. The whole building smelled like nachos and those weird rubber bowling shoes. He waved at me from lane 12. He smiled quick, this small nervous smile like he wasn't used to doing this either. He wasn't awkward at first, just a little jumpy. Like he kept checking behind me every few seconds, scanning the room, not really making eye contact properly. I thought maybe he was shy or didn't like crowds. The place was busy, so it made sense. We played a few rounds and he wasn't bad. He kept making jokes about how stiff he felt and how he always tilted the ball weird, and it made me relax a bit. Halfway through the game he asked if I wanted something to drink. I said yeah and handed him the money for mine, but he shook his head and said he'd cover it since I came out last minute. He walked off toward the bar area while I stayed near the lane trying to decide if I should keep practicing or wait. That's when everything changed so fast my brain barely kept up. I heard shouting at first. Not playful shouting, not drunk shouting, real shouting. Firm voices, sharp footsteps, the sound of chairs scraping across the floor. When I looked up, I saw two officers sprinting across the arcade section toward the bar. People moved out of the way instantly, scattering like they already knew this wasn't a joke. Before I could even understand what was happening, they tackled someone to the ground. And that person was him. My date. My actual date. I dropped the bowling ball straight onto the floor because my hands went numb. It rolled off the side of the lane and hit the barrier with this loud bang, but no one cared because everyone was watching the officers pin him down. One of them grabbed his arms and twisted them behind his back while the other searched his jacket pockets like he was expecting weapons. I stood there frozen, staring like the entire world had suddenly tilted sideways. Staff rushed over too. The manager, two workers, and some big guy in a staff hoodie who looked like security but probably wasn't officially. They all crowded around watching while one of the officers kept shouting at him to stop resisting. He wasn't fighting though. He just kept yelling something I couldn't hear, face pressed into the sticky carpet near the drinks counter. People started whispering, pulling out their phones, stepping away from the bar. The whole place felt like it stopped for a moment, except the music still blasted loudly over everything, which made it even weirder. I walked a bit closer because I needed to understand what was happening. I thought maybe they had the wrong person. Maybe someone else had done something and he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The manager stepped forward and pointed at him. I caught bits of what he said over the noise. He said something about staff-only doors, sneaking in, lockers, wallets going missing, security footage. The officers nodded like they already knew all of this and were just confirming the story. That's when it hit me. He hadn't gone to the bar to get drinks. He'd gone to slip into the staff area again. They'd been watching him the whole time. The manager said someone from staff recognized him as soon as he walked in because he'd been doing it for the last 3 days. Sliding into staff-only hallways, pretending he belonged there, grabbing wallets from lockers, taking cash, taking cards. They'd been trying to catch him on camera for days, but he kept slipping away before security arrived. Until tonight. Until the night I was with him. I felt this cold wave go through me so strong I had to grab the side of the table to stay steady. My date, the guy who'd been laughing at his terrible bowling form, had actually been waiting for the chance to dip into staff rooms again, using me as a distraction. He probably thought that if he brought a date, no one would suspect him. No one would think he was up to anything. One of the officers lifted him off the ground and snapped cuffs around his wrists while he kept his head down. He still didn't look at me. Not once. Not even a glance. It was like I didn't exist anymore. Like I was just part of the background noise in a night he planned for himself. They dragged him past the lanes toward the exit. I watched the whole time, frozen, unable to move. He didn't fight, didn't shout, didn't even try to explain himself. He just kept walking, shoulders low, face blank. One of the officers held his phone, scrolling through something on the screen while the other kept him steady. People stared at me like I was involved, like I brought him there to help him steal, like we were some weird criminal couple. I shook my head and stepped back, trying to disappear into the wall. I wanted to vanish completely. A staff member finally came over and asked if I was all right. She said they knew I had nothing to do with him because they'd been tracking him for days. They saw me walk in with him for the first time and knew I wasn't part of anything. She told me they were glad I wasn't with him longer because the last girl he brought there ended up losing her bag while he disappeared into the back room pretending he'd left something in the car. I didn't even respond. I just grabbed my bag and walked straight out of the building. The cold night air hit me like a punch. I didn't even look in the direction they dragged him. I didn't want to see anything else. I walked home in complete silence, trying to understand how someone could act so normal while planning something so messed up. How he laughed, flirted, bowled, and then casually tried to walk into staff rooms to steal from people who were probably just trying to finish their shifts. When I got home, I checked my phone. He deleted his Tinder profile. Like the whole thing never happened. Like I was just a piece of his plan that he didn't need anymore. I don't go to that bowling alley at night anymore. Not because I'm scared of the place, but because I keep imagining how easily I could have been blamed or how much worse the night could have gone if staff hadn't recognized him first. I knew the night was already weird before we even sat down, but I didn't realize how deep the weirdness went until the whole place flipped upside down. It started simple. We matched. She seemed confident but chill, not one of those people who type like they're interviewing you. She picked the restaurant herself and said she liked places that were busy but not loud, which honestly sounded perfect to me after all the dead, awkward dates I'd had. I got there first. It was one of those modern grill places with dim lighting and fake plants everywhere, the kind of place people go to pretend they're fancy even though the food is just normal. I sat near the window where you could see straight into the car park outside. I kept scrolling my phone because I didn't want to look like some lonely guy waiting for someone who might not show up. Then she walked in. She had this confident walk, but also looked like she was in her own world. Dark jacket, hair tied up, big boots that made this loud sound against the tiles. She spotted me instantly and came over smiling like we'd known each other longer than 5 messages. She sat down fast, like she wanted to get comfortable before she changed her mind about being there. We ordered our food and she started talking about random stuff. Work she hated, her cat, how she only joined Tinder because her friends dared her. She was funny in this sarcastic way, the type of person who jokes like they're hiding something but not in a scary way. I was actually enjoying myself for once. The vibe felt normal. Too normal. Every time a waiter walked past, she glanced toward the entrance though. Not obviously, but enough for me to notice. She kept tapping her fingers on the table too, like she wanted to stay busy even while she talked. I thought maybe she was nervous, or maybe she didn't like sitting still. We got our food and things finally calmed down a bit. People around us were laughing, plates clattering, that warm typical restaurant noise. I even forgot how awkward first dates usually are. I remember thinking that the night was going way smoother than I expected, and that everything changed in literally half a second. The front doors opened and 2 police officers walked in. Not rushing, not shouting, but walking with that purpose you see only when something serious is going on. The whole place went quiet, even though they didn't say a word. People turned their heads. Forks froze halfway to mouths. It was like a movie scene, except no one knew what part they were acting in. I didn't think they were there for anyone near us. I didn't think they were there for me. I didn't even think they were there for her, until they walked straight toward our table. She went completely still, like every thought in her head shut off. She kept her eyes down, but her jaw tightened so quickly it scared me. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look confused. She looked caught, fully caught. One officer said her name and told her she needed to stand up. His voice wasn't angry, just firm, like he'd repeated the same sentence 100 times. She didn't move at first. She just stared at the table, breathing slowly through her nose like she was trying not to break down right there. Then the other officer stepped closer and explained that they had CCTV footage from the car park outside showing her vandalizing multiple cars the night before. My whole body went numb. The car park, the one outside the restaurant, the one I could see from the window. She had picked this place. She walked in confident. She sat down like nothing happened. And now police were saying she was caught on camera smashing mirrors, dragging keys down doors, kicking lights, doing actual damage to random cars like she had some personal vendetta against every vehicle she saw. She didn't deny it. Not even once. She didn't try to argue, didn't say they were wrong, didn't try to run. She just stood up slowly like she'd been expecting this moment all day. Her shoulders dropped, and she whispered something I couldn't hear, but the officers didn't even respond. They cuffed her right there at the side of our table. People around us gasped. One woman covered her mouth with her hand. Some guy across the room pulled out his phone until his friend hit his arm and told him not to. I sat there frozen, staring at her plate of untouched food. The steam from her meal still rising like the world was completely normal even while everything around me was not. They guided her out of the restaurant while she kept her head down, refusing to look at anyone. Not the customers. Not the officers. Not me. They walked her past the window and I watched them escort her across the car park she apparently wrecked the night before. The same car park she made me sit next to unknowingly. Her reflection moved across the glass like some scene in a nightmare. After they left, the restaurant slowly went back to its noise. People whispered. Waiters pretended they weren't shocked. Some guy joked too loudly about how he hoped his car wasn't one of the victims. Everything felt unreal. I stayed sitting there because I didn't know what else to do. My appetite was gone. My brain wouldn't process what had just happened. A staff member eventually came over and awkwardly asked if I wanted the rest of the meal boxed or if I wanted the bill. I told him I just needed the bill, but I barely even read the numbers on it. I paid and walked out, my chest tight the whole time. The air outside felt colder. The car park looked normal and also not at the same time. I didn't see any broken cars, but that didn't make it less real. The idea of sitting across from someone who had done something so chaotic hours earlier made the whole world feel different. I'd unmasked her as soon as I got home. Her profile was still up, which made it even stranger. Like she'd been living 2 separate lives, and I accidentally stepped into the one she didn't hide well enough. I still think about how normal she looked when she walked in, how she laughed. How she acted like this was just a casual night out, like nothing in her world was blowing up behind the scenes. Dating apps are honestly wild because you never know who you're actually sitting across from. Some people hide things so well you only find out when police walk through the door looking for them. I wasn't even excited for the movie night. It was one of those plans you agree to because you're tired of canceling things and you want to feel like you're doing something with your life. I'd matched with him about a week before and he seemed normal enough. Nothing flashy, nothing strange. Just one of those chilled guys who types in full sentences and doesn't spam emojis. He suggested we watch a movie at his place since he lived pretty close to me. And honestly, I just said yes because the idea of not having to dress up felt good. I got there around 7 when the sky was already dark and the streetlights made everything look yellow. His flat was on the second floor of this older building that looked like it used to be nice decades ago, but now just kind of existed. The buzzer didn't work, so he came down to get me. He looked the same as his pictures, maybe a bit more quiet in person, but that didn't bother me. We walked up the stairs, and he kept talking about how he picked a good movie, something funny, not horror, because he said he didn't want the night to be weird. I remember thinking it was funny how specific he was about that. His flat was small but clean, like surprisingly clean for a guy who lives alone. The living room had a big sofa, a tiny coffee table, a lamp in the corner, and a TV that looked like he spent more money on it than anything else. He offered me a drink, showed me where the snacks were, and told me to pick where I wanted to sit. It was calm. Nothing felt off. The only weird thing was how often he picked up his phone, just small glances, tapping at the screen quickly and then putting it back down like he didn't want me to notice. We started the movie, and halfway through I realized he barely looked at the screen. He kept checking his phone and locking it again. Checking, locking, checking. I told myself maybe he had work messages or something important going on, but it was starting to feel distracting, like he was waiting for something to happen. I was just about to ask him if everything was all right when there was a loud bang on the front door. Not a knock, a bang, like someone hitting it with their fist hard enough to shake the whole hallway. I jumped so bad the drink almost spilled out of my hand. He froze. Completely still. His face went blank for a second, then tense. The banging continued, louder this time, with voices shouting from the other side telling him to open the door immediately. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I thought maybe it was one of those situations where someone has the wrong flat or some random neighbor fight. I looked at him and he didn't move. He just stared at the door like it was about to burst open. When he finally stood up, he raised his hands like he already knew what the problem was. He didn't look confused. He didn't look surprised. He just looked caught. The door burst open before he even reached it. Police flooded into the flat fast, shouting instructions, telling him to step back and not touch anything. One officer told me to stay seated with my hands visible. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded and froze on the sofa while everything happened around me like a nightmare you couldn't pause. They asked him his name, asked him to confirm the number of the flat, then asked him where his phone was. He didn't say a word. He pointed to the sofa where he had left it. One officer grabbed it and started scrolling through something while another kept guard on the doorway. Then one of them turned to me and asked how long I'd been there. I told them barely an hour. They asked if I knew him well, and I said no, I'd met him on Tinder. The officers exchanged this look like they'd heard that sentence too many times. That's when they told me. Someone had reported multiple scam accounts being set up using the same phone number, my number. Apparently, all of them were traced back to his address. Every login. Every fake profile. Every message. Every attempt to make someone click on something. All linked back here. To him. Using my number, which I had stupidly given him earlier that week when we swapped contacts. I felt sick instantly, like my whole body started buzzing from the inside out. I told them I had nothing to do with any of it, and that I didn't even know he used my number. They believed me straight away because the accounts had been made before I even arrived. All within the last few days. All from his Wi-Fi. All tied to his device fingerprint. All under fake names with the same number, my number. The officer holding his phone started reading things out loud. Login attempts. Verification codes. Messages requesting confirmation. I recognized the numbers from texts I ignored earlier that week, thinking they were random spam. They weren't spam. They were codes he needed to activate accounts he was making in my name, using me like a shield so nothing could be traced back to him directly. The worst part was how calm he looked while they talked, like he didn't care, like he didn't even feel guilty. Every time the officers questioned him, he just stared down at the carpet, breathing slowly, not denying anything, not explaining anything. I realized he had planned it. All of it. Meeting me, inviting me here, gaining enough trust that I'd give him my number without overthinking it. One officer helped me off the sofa and told me I should step outside while they detained him. He said it gently, like I was fragile, like I could drag into something way bigger than a movie night. I walked into the hallway in a daze while they handcuffed him inside. He didn't fight. He didn't yell. He didn't even look at me as they pulled him out of the flat, head down, hands behind his back. When they let him past me, I finally understood what that weird phone checking was earlier. He was making sure none of the accounts were asking for new verification codes. Making sure his scam trail was still hidden under my number. An officer walked me outside and told me I wasn't in trouble, but would need to give a statement later, just to confirm how I met him and when I gave him my number. I nodded the whole time, even though I could barely hear anything over the pounding in my head. I walked home alone that night, staring at my phone like it was something dirty I needed to wash. Every notification felt wrong. I deleted his contact before I even reached my building. Later that night, I went through my messages and saw all the codes I'd ignored earlier in the week. Each one felt like a warning I didn't understand at the time. I didn't sleep. I just lay there thinking about how easily someone can twist your life for their own plans. How casually he used my number like it meant nothing. How close I came to getting blamed for something I didn't even know existed. I haven't been to a movie night with anyone since. I was supposed to stay home, clean my room, maybe make breakfast, and just chill because the week drained me. But I woke up earlier than usual, and for some reason I checked Tinder the second I opened my eyes. That's when I saw her message. She'd matched with me late the night before and sent this quick, "Hey, we should grab a coffee if you're free tomorrow" kind of message. Normally, I'd ignore plans that fast, but I was bored and half awake and said yeah without thinking. She picked the place. A small trendy coffee shop that looked like it was made for people who post everything they do. Plants everywhere, wooden tables, pastel cups. I got there first and sat down with a small cappuccino, scrolling my phone while pretending to look relaxed. She walked in a few minutes later wearing this bright cream jacket, black jeans, and a scarf that looked like it was knitted by someone's aunt. She smiled when she saw me and walked over like she already knew me well, even though we had barely spoken. She sat across from me and started talking straight away. She was fast, kind of loud but confident. She kept leaning forward like she had something exciting to tell me every second. I didn't mind it at first because I prefer when someone takes the pressure off the conversation. She mentioned she'd been here before and that she loved their pastries. She pointed at the counter and said we should split something. I told her to pick, and she jumped up to order. While she was at the counter, I noticed one of the staff members staring at her like he'd just seen someone he recognized but couldn't place. He whispered something to a girl beside him, and the girl immediately looked at my date. She didn't smile. She didn't look confused. She just nodded sharply and disappeared into the back, leaving the guy standing there with this tight expression. I assumed they were annoyed at each other because retail jobs are stressful, and maybe they had a long morning. I didn't think it had anything to do with her. She came back with a pastry on a plate and started talking again like nothing was happening. But I noticed how the guy behind the counter kept glancing over at us every few seconds. Proper staring, not even trying to hide it. I leaned back in my seat and tried to focus on what she was saying, but she talked so fast it felt like she was trying to fill every second with noise. I don't even think she read anything I said because she would just jump into another story without pausing. After a few minutes, the girl who went into the back earlier came on again with a walkie clip to her waist. Not a tiny one either. One of those chunky security ones you see in shopping centers. She whispered something into it while walking toward the counter. The guy nodded and stepped away, and she stood there staring right at my date. Not at me. Not at the table. At her. My chest tightened. I didn't know why, but the vibe changed instantly. Then I heard it. A loud crackling response from the walkie telling her someone was already on their way. I looked at my date, trying to see if she noticed. She didn't. She was too busy talking about some trip she took. The girl at the counter slowly turned her body toward us and said something into the walkie again, and the entire room felt like it held its breath. Even the other customers started noticing. Then 2 security guards walked into the shop. Not angry, not loud, but very direct. They went straight to our table. My date finally paused mid-sentence when a shadow covered the pastry plate. She looked up and her face changed so suddenly it didn't even look real. Her whole expression shut down in this blank, cold way like she practiced it before. One of the guards asked her to stand up. She didn't move. Her eyes darted to the counter, then to the exit, then back at them. She looked like someone trapped in a small box with no way out. The guard repeated himself, firmer this time. She stood up like her legs weighed too much. I stayed frozen in my chair because I had no idea what was going on. They didn't look at me once. They didn't care about me. This was all about her. One of the guards said she needed to come with them immediately and that the store had footage of her from earlier that morning. I didn't understand at first. I thought she must have dropped something or maybe argued with someone before. Then the girl at the counter held up a tablet with a paused CCTV frame. I only caught it for a second, but it was enough. My date. Same cream jacket. Same jeans. Same scarf. Reaching into a shelf and slipping something small into her pocket while pretending to fix her hair. She wasn't even subtle in the video. She didn't look scared or rushed. She looked casual, comfortable, like she'd done it many times before. She didn't deny it. She didn't explain anything. She just looked down at the floor while they guided her toward the back of the shop. She walked past me without even glancing in my direction. Like the whole date never happened. Like she had already moved on to whatever consequence she knew was waiting for her. The staff whispered to each other while the guards took her away. Some customers stared at me like I should have known or been embarrassed. I just sat there completely frozen, staring at the pastry she bought. I couldn't read anything that had just happened. One minute she was talking nonstop like she was trying to impress me. The next minute she was being dragged away for stealing something stupid enough that she didn't even bother changing outfits afterward. The girl with the walkie came over and apologized for the chaos, telling me I could stay if I wanted. I didn't. I felt this weird mix of embarrassment and shock like I'd stepped into someone else's life for a second. I walked out without finishing my drink or touching the pastry. When I stepped outside, I saw them loading her into a small security vehicle that parks behind the shops. She still didn't look up. Not even once. She didn't argue or cry or protest. She just sat there staring at the floor the same way she did inside when they first approached. I unmatched her as soon as I got home. Her profile was gone by then anyway. I don't know if she deleted it or if she used one of those accounts that vanish every few days. But I kept thinking about how confident she looked walking in, how much she talked, how she acted like she controlled the whole date, and then how fast all of it collapsed the second someone recognized her. I've been back to that coffee shop since, but I always sit far from the entrance now, just in case someone else walks in wearing the exact same outfit they got caught in before. I'd just come home from a boring shift, threw my stuff on the bed, and told myself I'd chill for the rest of the night. Then this guy I matched with earlier messaged me saying he was already near my area and asked if I wanted to go for a quick walk. Normally I'd say no because meeting someone that fast feels too rushed, but I'd been cooped up all week and the idea of walking in the evening sounded kinda nice. He seemed calm in our chats, nothing pushy, nothing weird, and I just thought, alright, fine, why not? I got ready quick and met him outside the entrance of this huge park near my place. The sky was dim but still bright enough to see everything. That weird bluish light right before it gets dark. He waved when he spotted me and walked over looking exactly how he looked in his pictures, maybe even a bit better. Tall, quiet, hands in pockets, the kind of guy you'd assume was shy but not awkward. He asked me if I was good, and we started walking into the park. The paths were almost empty because it was a time of day when people either head home or stay out late but not in between. Trees on both sides, a few benches, some dog walkers far off. He talked about random things, like food spots he liked and how he grew up near a similar park. I noticed he kept looking around every few seconds, scanning the area like he was expecting someone, but he did it in this subtle way that didn't seem threatening. I thought maybe he was just getting used to being around someone new. We walked toward the lake part of the park, and I remember thinking how peaceful it looked, all quiet with the water reflecting the last bit of light. That was the moment when everything switched, like someone hit a completely different setting in the world without warning. I heard this loud sound from behind us. Not a car, not shouting, but multiple heavy steps hitting concrete fast. Like more than a few people running at once. I turned around expecting maybe a group of kids messing about, but instead I saw 3 officers sprinting straight toward us from the main entrance path. Before I even had time to process that, more came in from the left side near the trees. They weren't just patrolling. They were fully swarming the place. My stomach dropped instantly. I froze and stepped back without thinking. The guy looked confused at first, then annoyed, then weirdly calm like this wasn't new to him. The officers shouted at him to keep his hands visible and not move. One of them had his hand on something clipped to his vest, ready in case things went wrong. I swear in under 10 seconds we were surrounded. People on the other side of the park stopped walking and watched, some pulling out their phones. I didn't say anything because I was terrified they'd think I was part of something. One officer stood in front of me telling me to stay back while the others formed this tight circle around him. They kept saying he matched a suspect they'd been searching for all week. Someone who had been breaking into houses around the area, mostly during the day when people were at work. Apparently he'd been caught on a neighbor's security camera, and the footage had been sent around to the local patrol units. The suspect had the same build, same hairstyle, same sharp jawline, even the same jacket color. I looked at him because I needed to see his face to understand what was going on, and the weirdest part was how calm he stayed. Like this wasn't the first time something like this happened. He kept his hands up and didn't argue, didn't panic, didn't even look at me. He stared straight ahead while the officers checked his pockets and patted him down. He didn't fight, didn't question anything, didn't react. It was like he'd already accepted whatever they were about to do to him. One of the officers told me to step further back so they could bring him toward the path. I did exactly what they said because my whole body was shaking. I didn't even understand what I had just walked into. I kept thinking about the fact that we were just walking a few minutes ago, talking about stupid random stuff, and now he was surrounded like they finally cornered him. They asked for his full name and where he lived. He gave it to them in this flat, tired voice. Another officer spoke quietly into his radio, probably checking something in their system. The whole time I felt like I was outside my own body watching it happen to someone else. A minute later, the officer on the radio got a response. He said the suspect they were looking for had a matching face, but the height was slightly off and the tattoo on the wrist wasn't there. They still kept him detained while they checked other things, but the atmosphere changed slightly, like they were less sure now. He finally looked at me then, for just a second. His eyes didn't show fear or guilt. It was something stranger, like he was embarrassed but also used to this kind of trouble. Like his life had been messy long before today, and this was just another weird incident added to the list. After what felt like forever, they let him go but told him they'd still keep his details on file until the investigation wrapped up. He nodded, still not saying anything to me or them. They left in the same hurry they arrived, and suddenly the park was quiet again like none of it had just happened. People slowly walked off, whispering. Dogs barked again. The world restarted. I didn't know what to do or say, and he didn't explain anything. He just stood there, rubbing his wrist where they had grabbed him. I told him I was heading home, and he just nodded. No apology, no explanation, nothing. That weird calmness stayed on his face the whole time, like the chaos didn't even touch him. I walked out of the park so fast my legs were shaking. I kept thinking about how dangerous that situation could have been, how easily they could have mistaken him for the wrong person. How close I was to someone who looked identical to a guy breaking into people's houses for weeks. By the time I got home, he had deleted the chat on the app. His profile vanished. It was like he erased himself from my phone before I even closed the door behind me. I still walk past that park sometimes, but I don't go in during the evening anymore. Every time I pass the entrance, I think about how some people can walk around with entire stories behind their eyes that you'll never understand until you're standing next to them in the middle of a situation you should have never been part of. I'm not gonna lie. The only reason I even agreed to meet her was because everything about our chat felt way too easy. It was one of those matches where the conversation actually flowed for once. No dry replies, no weird energy, no one trying too hard. She was confident, but in that calm way, like she'd been on the app long enough to know how to talk without making it awkward. I was bored that week anyway, so when she suggested going to this rooftop bar she loved, I said yeah without even thinking twice. Looking back, I should have paid attention to how quickly she pushed it, like she didn't want to text too long. The day was weirdly warm for the evening. The sky had that late sunset look where everything turns orange for 10 minutes before it gets dark. I remember thinking the whole thing might actually be decent. I got to the area a bit early because I didn't want to be that guy who shows up late trying to look mysterious. The bar was on top of this tall hotel in the center, the kind of place people go to take pictures pretending their lives are way more exciting than they actually are. I waited by the entrance, leaning on one of those metal rail things while security stood near the doors checking IDs. Everything felt normal. Nothing in the air felt strange or tense. She texted me saying she was a minute away, and not long after that she came walking up the street. She looked different from her pictures, but not in a bad way, just more real, like she had slept better in the photos. She smiled straight away and walked over like she already knew me. I remember thinking she seemed almost too relaxed to be meeting someone for the first time, but I pushed that thought away. We walked up to the building and joined the small queue for the lift that takes you to the top floor. She kept talking about how nice the view was and how I'd like the food, saying she comes here a lot. The whole time she was looking around in this stiff way, scanning the area like she was expecting someone she didn't want to see. I thought maybe she was just checking her surroundings the way people do before going into busy places. When we finally reached the security at the front, I took out my ID and she took out hers. The guard barely glanced at mine, but he stared at hers for longer than anyone normally would. His face changed slightly, and he looked at her, then at another guard standing behind him. I thought maybe she looked younger than she actually was, and they were just making sure. Then the guard told us to wait and stepped aside, calling someone on his radio. That's when the whole vibe shifted. She went from relaxed to stiff in like 1 second. Her hands went to her pockets, and she looked down at the floor, not saying anything. I had no idea what was happening. I thought maybe her ID was expired or something small like that. I didn't even get a chance to ask because 2 more security eyes came out from the inside of the bar. One of them had a printout in his hand, a still frame from what looked like CCTV footage. Everything after that happened so fast it barely felt real. They told her she wasn't allowed inside and that she needed to step to the side. She muttered something under her breath and took half a step back, and one of the guards immediately caught her by the arm. Another one took the printout and held it next to her face, comparing it like some detective stuff. I could see enough to make out that the picture showed someone pouring something into a drink at the bar counter. The person in the image had the same hair, same jacket, same profile. I swear my heart dropped into my stomach so quickly I couldn't even think straight. The guard said she had been seen spiking someone's drink the night before, and the bar put out her face to all staff, telling them to stop her if she ever showed up again. They didn't even bother hiding what they were saying because they spoke loud enough for everyone in the queue to hear. She didn't fight them. She didn't shout or deny anything. She just stood there frozen, staring at the floor like she knew this was coming. She kept her head down, breathing in these short chopped-up breaths, not even looking up at me or at anyone else. The guards pulled her away from the entrance and walked her toward the back of the building where staff usually go in. The whole time she didn't look up once. I just stood there like an idiot, not knowing whether I should follow or leave or ask questions. No one acknowledged me, and honestly, I didn't want them to. I felt sick. I kept thinking about how easily that could have been me sitting across from her drinking something she handed me. I didn't know the guy from the CCTV footage, obviously, but the thought of her planning something like that made my skin crawl. I barely read her messages properly after that because all of it felt like I dodged something huge without realizing it. The line kept moving like nothing happened. People behind me were whispering and staring, probably thinking I was involved somehow. I stepped out of the queue and walked away from the building, trying to calm down. I kept replaying her face when they held the printout next to her. She didn't even flinch, like she already accepted whatever was about to happen. I didn't stay in that area long. I walked 3 streets away before I even pulled out my phone again. She had unmatched me already. Her whole profile was gone. The thought of how quickly she disappeared felt strange, like she was used to things collapsing that fast. I didn't go home straight away. I sat on a bench nearby just trying to take it in. She seemed so normal for the first few minutes, talking about food and views and all this pointless stuff. But thinking back, she talked like someone trying to distract themselves. Someone who didn't want silence long enough to think about what they did. I never heard anything else about it. No news, no updates, nothing. It's like the whole situation got swallowed by the city in one night. I still think about it sometimes when I'm near that side of town. How close I came to walking into something I wasn't meant to be part of. How normal she looked right before everything fell apart. I knew the night was already slightly weird before I even stepped inside his flat. And that was honestly my fault because I ignored every tiny thing my brain tried to warn me about. I'd matched with this guy a few days before, and he seemed alright. He wasn't trying too hard, he wasn't giving any strange vibes in the chat, and he didn't ask anything creepy. He just kept it casual, talking about random stuff. And I kind of like that because most people online are either trying too hard or not trying at all. He invited me over to his place for a chill first link. Nothing crazy. I actually thought it was calm because he lived like 10 minutes from me. I got there in the evening when the sky was that weird gray that makes everything look washed out. His building wasn't horrible, but it had that old block vibe, like the kind of place where you can hear someone sneezing 3 floors away. The hallway smelled like old carpet and microwave meals, and I don't know why, but that stuck in my head. He opened the door before I even knocked properly, like he was standing right behind it waiting. He looked the same as his pictures, but a bit more tired, like he hadn't slept well, or someone annoyed him before I came. The flat looked small but decent enough. Not dirty, just lived in. Sofa pushed up near the window, TV on mute, some clothes on a chair. Nothing too wild. He asked if I wanted something to drink and told me the glasses were in the kitchen if I wanted to rinse one out. He said he had to sort something in the bedroom real quick, and that he'd be back in a second. Again, nothing that made me panic. So I headed to the kitchen thinking this was just a normal, awkward first hangout where both people pretend to be comfortable. The kitchen was tiny, and I could tell someone had cooked earlier because the smell of seasoning was still there. The counter was a bit messy, but not in a gross way. Wanted someone rushed to make food and didn't clean the pans properly. I remember opening the cupboard with the glasses and thinking about how quiet the rest of the flat felt. Too quiet. Even the building around us sounded muted. It was that weird silence where you can hear your own breathing louder than normal. I washed a glass and filled it, and that's when I heard this noise from the hallway. Heavy and sharp, like someone stomping. Before I even had time to think, the whole flat exploded into chaos. The front door flew inwards so violently that it hit the wall behind it, and this huge bang echoed through the whole place. I dropped the glass straight into the sink, and my whole body froze. I couldn't understand what was happening. All I heard was shouting and boots rushing through the hallway. Armed officers rushed into the kitchen before I even turned fully around. I swear my brain just blanked. I threw my hands up without even thinking because the way they burst in made it feel like I was in some crime documentary. They told me not to move, and someone else kept yelling something about securing the area. I didn't even know what to say. I just stood there like my soul left my body. They dragged me out of the kitchen into the living room and sat me down while they searched the flat. I couldn't see the guy anywhere. I kept waiting for him to walk out confused like I was, but he didn't show. I kept telling them I didn't know what was happening, that I literally just walked in like 15 minutes ago. They kept separating their voices, one telling the others to check the rooms, another asking me questions. It felt like being trapped inside one of those frantic dreams you can't wake up from. After a few minutes that felt like an hour, one of the officers crouched near me and said someone in the building had reported loud screams coming from the flat earlier that day. Not just normal shouting, real screams. The kind that make people think someone's being hurt. They said they didn't know if the person responsible was still in the flat or if someone else was inside. Hearing that made every hair on my arm stand up. My heart was beating way too fast for me to even process it properly. I told them I literally just arrived and that nothing happened while I was there. I kept looking toward the hallway waiting for him, wondering why he hadn't come out. That's when 2 officers came back out of the bedroom holding him. He wasn't injured or anything, but he looked weird. Pale, sweating, staring at the ground like he didn't want to see anyone. He wouldn't look at me at all. They had him handcuffed, and he didn't even argue. Not one word came out of his mouth. He just let them pull him toward the door while the rest kept clearing the place. My stomach twisted so hard because I realized he'd been in the bedroom the entire time while I was in the kitchen, and he didn't react when the door got kicked in. He didn't call out, didn't defend himself, didn't try to explain anything. He just stood there like someone had already told him this was going to happen. The officers kept asking him what the screams were about and who else had been in the flat, but he said nothing. They took him outside and left me sitting on the sofa while they kept checking everything. Every second felt heavier. The flat felt colder. The worst part was the silence after he got taken out. It made me wonder what actually happened earlier, whether he'd been arguing with someone or if it was something way worse that he wasn't saying. After a while, they finally told me I could leave because it was clear I had nothing to do with whatever went down. They said they might need a statement later since I had been present, even if it was only for a short time. I walked out of that building shaking like I'd just been spun around. The whole place smelled different when I stepped outside, like the cold hit harder than usual. My brain felt scrambled, and I didn't even know how to explain what happened to myself. I kept replaying how he looked when they walked him out, the way he didn't even glance at me like I wasn't real, like he'd already accepted something way worse was going on. I didn't want to imagine what those screams were about, or why his neighbor felt the need to call it in hours before I'd even arrived. I haven't gone near that area since. I didn't lock him because there was nothing left to block. His account disappeared the same night. The whole thing felt like this messed up glitch in my life, like I accidentally walked into a moment that wasn't meant for me. I didn't think anything was off at first, and I know that makes me sound dumb, but honestly, the night started normal in that way where you're just trying to convince yourself you're not wasting your time again. I matched with this girl who seemed chilled, kind of quiet in her pictures. Nothing too flashy, nothing too weird. She kept saying she liked simple nights, and I was fine with that because I was tired of doing the whole restaurant thing and pretending I wasn't bored halfway through. The only thing that stood out was how quick she was to set the plan. She said we should meet somewhere casual, somewhere calm, and that she'd pick the spot. I didn't think much of it. I just wanted something to go well for once. She told me to meet her outside this big supermarket car park around 8 p.m. Dead area, huge empty rows of spaces, but well lit. I got there a few minutes early and stood leaning on the wall, scrolling, killing time. She pulled up in this small black car that looked like it had lived 3 different lives already. The kind of car you only take to work because it's too old to care about breaking down. She waved me over like she already knew me. I climbed in, and before I could even settle, she said we should eat in the car instead of going anywhere. She had a bag of takeaway on the back seat and said she wanted the first hangout to be comfy. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was weird, but I also didn't want to make it awkward 5 minutes in. So I went along with it. She passed me one of the boxes, and we sat there with the engine off, windows slightly fogged already from the heat of the food. She seemed on edge, tapping her fingers against the steering wheel, glancing around every few seconds like she was waiting for someone to show up. I asked her if everything was good, and she just nodded too fast. I could feel something was off, but I kept brushing it off because I didn't want to look paranoid. The food tasted fine, but I barely paid attention to it. I kept clocking how she wouldn't stay still. Every time a car turned into the car park, she froze. I told myself she was just nervous meeting someone new. I've been on dates where the other person was shaking like they were about to take an exam, so it wasn't completely new. But this was different. Too jumpy. Too defensive. She kept gripping the steering wheel like she was about to drive off, even though the key wasn't even in the ignition. I remember the exact moment everything snapped. I'd barely taken my third bite when the whole car lit up with this blinding white light from behind us. I thought it was just someone reversing badly, but the light stayed. Then I saw shadows moving fast around the sides, and before I could even figure out what was happening, I heard shouting outside. Not normal shouting. Organized shouting. Proper tactical voices. Heavy boots hitting the ground. The kind you only hear when something serious is happening. My stomach dropped so hard I felt sick instantly. I turned to her and she got her hands over her mouth like she was trying not to scream. That's when I knew she'd been hiding something from the second I got in the car. She kept breathing way too fast, mumbling with her head down. I couldn't even tell what she was saying. I didn't get the chance to ask anything because someone outside started banging on the window, telling us not to move. I froze completely. I honestly thought someone had set us up, or we were in the middle of something way bigger than we understood. The doors were yanked open, and within seconds there were armed officers everywhere, pointing lights in our faces. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept my hands where they could see them. One of them pulled me out of the car so fast that the food box spilled all over the seat. Someone else dragged her out the other side. She looked like she was about to pass out. They sat us on the ground separately, still shouting instructions, still treating it like we were dangerous. I couldn't even process what they thought we did. I hadn't even known her for an hour. After a few minutes of chaos, one of the officers crouched in front of me asking me who I was, how I knew her, why I was in the car. I told him everything, exactly as it happened, and he stared at me like he was trying to see through me. Then he said the car had been reported stolen earlier that morning. Apparently someone had broken into a driveway 2 streets away from where I live and took it in broad daylight. The owner reported it instantly. I felt the whole world flip upside down hearing that. I looked over at her and she was just staring at the ground like she already knew this was coming. She didn't even try to deny it. She didn't say anything. She just sat there shaking her head, not even looking at anyone. They cuffed her right there on the tarmac, while she kept whispering that she didn't mean for it to get this far. Hearing that made my chest feel weird because it meant she had known exactly what she was doing. She picked me up in a stolen car and pretended everything was normal. The officers kept asking me the same questions over and over to make sure I wasn't involved. I must have repeated myself 10 times. I've never felt that useless in my life. Just sitting there, freezing, adrenaline messing with my whole body, knowing I could have been dragged into something insane without even realizing it. They let me go after a while, but told me I should probably get a cab home. And that the supermarket cameras confirmed I walked into the car after she arrived alone. They didn't trust her at all. The craziest part is how fast everything went from being awkward but normal to something straight out of some wild story no one would believe. One minute I was eating in her car thinking she was just shy, and the next minute I was on the ground surrounded by officers with rifles because she didn't want to admit she'd taken a car that wasn't hers. I walked home that night instead of getting a cab. I needed the air, even though it was freezing. I didn't even bother eating the rest of the food. My hands smelled like the seasoning for hours. The whole night just kept replaying in my head like some messed up short film. I kept thinking how close I was to getting dragged into something way worse, all because I didn't trust my gut the second she suggested eating in the car. I haven't read any of her messages since, not that I expect any. I just keep thinking how easily I could have been blamed for something I didn't do. I'm just glad I got out without my name getting pulled into anything official.